Here is the Derby Go Kit, which is produced near Winnipeg in Canada, and basically for more than 20 years people have been putting these kits together and doing soapbox racing. And this kit includes the steering pieces, a pitman arm, cross member, steering shaft, steering rods, wheel bolts, spindles, tie rods, wheels, and all the fasteners that are necessary for the assembly, as well as templates and instructions. And on the back of the kit is a steering wheel. Here is the back of the kit, and it shows a steering wheel template that you can cut out and use to make your steering wheel. And inside there are lots of instructions about making brakes and different tips on how to put the kit together. Okay, well, opening the kit up, you can see that there's instructions on just about every surface, and this surface right here is a template for drilling the front end, so don't throw this out. You're going to need this to create the template for attaching the front end pieces that are included in the kit. Also, there are different suggestions on how to make the brakes, and there's about 3 different ways of making the brakes, and we'll look at that a little bit more. Like I said, there are multiple instructions inside, printed on both sides and in both English and in French, with a lot of tips. Here's another example of brakes, a lot of examples of brakes, and then different examples of steering wheel design, and then more specifically templates on cutting the base of the racer out of 5/8 inch plywood, and how to screw everything together. Okay, well, what I've done is I've taken everything out of the box now and laid it out pretty much in the position it's going to be used. You can see you should have 2 different sizes of wheels, okay, and the bigger wheels go on the back, and basically each wheel has an axle, and it has a mounting bracket that allows the axle to be mounted to the wooden frame. Okay, and there will be a couple of screws for each side, 1/4 inch screws, 1/4 20 screws, that will mount the bracket to the 5/8 inch thick plywood base. And in the front, you'll see a smaller wheel, and you'll see that axle again, but it's on something that swivels, and this is basically the kingpin assembly, and the axle screws into that. And then there's a steering arm that fits down through the center of this, and it's fastened in place by a set screw, a hex type set screw, and the hex wrench is included with the kit. Now here's the front axle and the screws that hold the front axle in place on the 5/8 inch piece of plywood. Same thing going on the other side. Now you've got your steering arms in place, and those have to be positioned appropriately so that the rods that are what you could call the tie rods, there's 2 of those, can connect through here and here, okay, to those to turn them the right way. Now you'll have to take a close look at the diagram as to which tie rod goes on which side, and then this attaches to one of the tie rods, and this attaches to the steering column. The steering column fits on here, and there's at one end of the steering column there's something that'll fix this in place, okay, and that gets bolted to the steering, or to the base, and the other end has this little triangular thing which fits in here and then is held in place with a cotter pin, okay, and then there's these 3 countersunk screws which fit here and in here, and this is what holds the steering wheel. Okay, the steering wheel attaches on the back of that with these 3, and the steering wheel is sort of left to your imagination, but like I said, there's a template on the back of the box that shows you how you might make the steering wheel. Okay, anyhow, those are the pieces of the Go kit, and the next thing that we'll do is map out on a piece of plywood the base that we're going to cut up according to the diagram that's included in the box to make the basic race car. So now we've gone to the lumber yard and gotten a 5/8 inch thick piece of sheathing that is made out of either spruce or pine, and they will cut that up for you. They'll do at least 1 or 2 free cuts, and so I had them take a 4x8 sheet of material and cut it in half, and after cutting it in half, we started to lay out the design, which you can cut out of a 4x4 sheet. Now this 4x4 sheet should be oriented as in the pattern on the instruction sheet, so that the grain of the plywood goes across. Okay, so here's the grain of the plywood, and it's going across, and what I've done is I have outlined with a pen and marked off using a carpenter square and a ruler all of the different places where we're going to need to put a cut. And in some cases we've got assistance for these cuts from templates that were provided with the packing. So you can see here's the steering wheel. And the template for the steering wheel, we just outlined that out on the plywood. A more crucial cut is over here with the steering, and this is from the actually I think the front of the carton. And what you do is you'll be lining this cutout on this little square here, and then once you've done that, you double check your measurements, but there will be a little place where there is an X here and here, and that is where the axle, the front axle, will be placed. We'll be putting 1/4-inch holes in those two places. So what you do is you drill out 1/4-inch hole, you put the bolt through it, and then once that's in one place, then you drill the second 1/4-inch hole. That way you'll be right on the money for that. You can see the cutouts for the wheels in the front and in the back here, and then there's other pieces that are cut that are for various parts of the steering tower and the seat. Okay, so let's go ahead and do some cutting. Okay, well, here are the pieces which I cut out in their approximate locations. You can see the cutouts for the front wheels and the rear wheels, and then this is for what I might call a steering tower, and underneath there's a cutout for the steering mechanism, which goes through this hole, and then the steering shaft goes down to this area. And then there's the seats, which are going to sit roughly like this on here. Okay, now I've only got one side of the seat on here right now, and then down here we'll put some sort of a foam to make it a little more comfortable. And then, as you know, as from before, we had some holes that we're going to be drilling in a couple of spots for the front axle housing. And then I started cutting out from a template the steering wheel. And I have this little jigsaw here that we'll use to cut these holes, because these rounded edges make it easier to do with the jigsaw. And I can bring the jigsaw around to the various activity centers and give somebody a chance to design their own steering wheels and cut their steering wheels out on the jigsaw, and that ought to be some fun. Okay, now the trick to making cuts with a jigsaw like this is that you have this blade, and it has like a T-shaped thing on both ends. And what happens is you drill a hole in the area that you want to cut, and then you make the hole big enough so that you can get the blade through, and then you hang the blade up on this little groove that's in here. Okay, and you have this knob loose enough, and that knob should be counterclockwise to loosen it, and it attaches under here to another little T-shaped slot, which maybe I can get in there to point out. It's right in here. Okay, and you have to push down a little bit to get that to go on there. Now it's trapped on there, and then you tighten up this knob to get some tension on the blade, and listen to the blade. You can get a little tension on it. You hear that come on, that note go up a little higher. Okay, so now you're ready to start cutting with that, and you're not going to be able to necessarily cut completely in a straight line. You're going to have to work your way into it, and it takes just a little bit of experience, but ultimately you will have gone around in every direction and made nice clean edges at each spot. Okay. Okay, now drilling the holes for the front axle. First you drill one in the place where the template showed you to drill it, and then put the axle in with a bolt, okay, and then go back over here and you drill your second hole, okay, right through there. And you can just see actually that I've drilled it, and it's in the perfect location now. Now this axle is actually going underneath the platform, but for the drilling operation you have it on the top. Okay, now it's probably a good idea to get off the little bits of splinters and things on the edges of where you've been cutting. There's still some rough edges here, and using a sander or sandpaper to smooth that out is a good idea. And what I'm going to do first, yeah, I've already done some sanding here. I'm going to just do a little bit more here. Bending it a little bit. Get those edges, see those little burrs on there? Okay, here's the steering wheel, and here's the centerpiece for the steering wheel. And to drill the holes, to set that up, you put that thing in there, figure out the orientation you want it to be, and then mark it with a pen, okay, like that. And these are the bolts that have the countersunk head on them, and they are 3/16 is the size of the hole. So I'll just drill these holes 3/16. Once you're ready for final assembly, you can shorten up those screws, and just with a hacksaw shorten them up after the bolts are tightened up, because you shouldn't have to take them off after that. But maybe before you screw everything together, what you'll want to do is do some painting and finishing. Okay, now we're looking at pieces A and C on the diagram. That's right here. And you'll notice that the back of the seat is tilted a little bit. And so if you look at this, it's tilted about 2 inches, okay? And what'll happen is that the back piece needs to get screwed and glued at that angle. Okay, so here is the angle, 2 inches on each of those, and then the back piece is going to get screwed and glued on there. Okay, what I did is every 2 inches I put another mark in between those 2 lines so that we can have them be the places where the holes are drilled. And again, I'm using a 3/16, or actually I'm using a 1/8 inch guide hole. Okay, well here's A, B, and C screwed together, and when it's done with the teens, of course that'll be done at the time with the pre-drilled screw holes, and we'll use the Gorilla Glue at that time too to finish it off and make it more sturdy. At that point, hopefully the teens will have gone over this whole thing with sandpaper and get it ready for painting, or priming and painting. Okay, well, the cowling, which is what they call this piece, is a little deceiving when you look at the instruction sheet. The top piece that they have you cut, F, turns out this is F right here, and it turns out to be a little on the long side, and F is between the 2 side pieces, which are E and D. Okay, this is E and D, and it can't go all the way down to the front, because if it did, then this whole thing would be lifted up in the air. The other thing is that when you look at G, which is the piece that has the hole in it for the steering column, G has to be snugged up to the top. Here, let's see if we can get in there. I'm going to take this off so you can see better. But G needs to be snugged up right to F. So there's a little gap down at the bottom. And where it says that there's 4 inches coming up here, okay, between that and an angle, that really doesn't work out so well. What I found was that since this is a triangle, but the hypotenuse is along the bottom of this, if you put a 1-inch margin back from the front piece parallel, okay, then the steering column fits the way that it's supposed to fit. So looking at it from the side, you can see where I've got the 1 1/4 inch sheetrock screws. You can see kind of how the whole thing fits. And I did not glue this yet, because this particular one needs to maybe come apart as part of demonstration. But I also did not primer this one or paint it yet, because for the same reason. I want people to see where the marks are as we go along. And easy way to center this cowling is, to get it nice and square, is the fact that the whole thing is 22 inches wide. So if you put a mark at 11, then you'll know how to center the cowling across. The cowling from side to side is 6 inches. So at 3 inches, you'll be able to line that up. Now, once you've got that lined up, you draw a line all the way around here, and then what you can do is you can pre-drill your holes along here, and the whole thing ends right here. Okay, so from about here, every 2 inches, if you drill a hole, you'll have a really nice pre-drilled way of attaching that cowling in place and getting it all nice and square. Okay, well, here is the racer without any paint on it, and I've put it together the way it should be. And you'll notice I put the sheetrock screws about every 2 inches in there, and maybe you wouldn't need to make it quite so armor clad here. But okay, notice a few things. The seat back is angled back, like in the diagram, and the steering wheel hole that you make in the steering wheel has to be big enough so that the shaft slips easily up into the steering wheel. Okay, it may take you a little bit of finagling to get the cotter pin to go through, but it will go through eventually after fooling around with it. As far as the wheels are concerned, when you drill these 2 holes and the bracket goes underneath the frame of this thing, drill the 2 holes in such a way that the bracket sticks a little proud of your wheel opening, and that way there's no chance that if the wheel wobbles that it will touch the base. Another few things to look at here. I'll show you in a minute. Okay, now when you put the console, the steering console, and the seat, what you want to do is map out on the top of the frame where all the holes need to be, and then drill the holes in from the top, and then when it's time to put the pieces on, to put the console and the seat on, you actually put the screws in from underneath about every 2 inches. These have to be angled a little bit to match the incline of the seat back. Okay, now up here on the steering system, you'll note that the L-shaped bracket, okay, comes in from this side, which when you're looking at the car, that's the left side of the car, okay, and that comes up, and then the tie rod from the right side sits on it after that, and then that goes through to what they call the pitman arm on here, and there's a slot in the steering column that is not symmetric. It's off to one side, but really ultimately when you're setting your steering, okay, when you're organizing your steering from side to side, okay, you can account for that Okay, you'll have to fool around a little bit so that it steers the same amount to the left as it does to the right. But you will be able to do it. And the other thing is to assemble all the steering, including the shaft, before you screw down the console, okay? And that way everything will wind up in about the right place. So that is just about what I've got to tell you for this. I will be available to answer questions and be able to show you the demo car and show you places where it got a little bit confusing. Okay, well, here is an example of a braking system that I designed, which might work very well and is very simple to construct. Basically, what it is, it's a U-shaped piece of flat steel that swings on a pivot up high. So that pivot is up here. And then when you push on a bar on either side, A or B, then what happens is that pivot swings this way, or that bar swings this direction. It's pivoted up from up here, so it swings in an arc this direction. Now the bottom of the bar, okay, has a piece of bicycle tire wrapped around it, okay, and normally that sits up in the air, but when you push on A or B or both, then what happens is that the bicycle tire comes down and hits the road, and that slows the car down. Okay, now for that to happen, you have to have a couple of slots in the chassis, in the wood chassis, so that this bar can swing and be free to move back and forth to allow that to scrape on the ground. Okay, now the nice thing about this is it just requires basically 4 bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it requires a piece of flat steel, okay, like 1.5 inch flat steel that has some holes drilled in it, 1 for each pivot, and then 1 for each brake pedal, we'll call them brake pedals, and then it gets bent here and here, and basically the tire gets wrapped around in this area, okay, and then the whole thing slides through from the bottom through these slots and gets attached with those bolts, and then those bolts get put on, and so it really is a rather simple way of solving the problem.